the Christy Miller books have sold millions. I think we're at 5.5 million copies of those books sold and translated in other languages. And the way the Lord chose to use those stories with readers, and all the mail I get from girls who say, my best friend doesn't read, but she watches movies. Please make a movie, because then I can talk to her about it. And
today, I am so honored to have the privilege to talk with a very famous author on our show, the Generous Girl Podcast. You're going to have an opportunity to hear more from Robin Jones Gunn, very accomplished writer, and her story. And, one of her books she talks about on this episode is called A Victim of Grace. And I think that's just such a beautiful title for a book of how we're all victims of grace and the various things that happen in our lives and God's mercy and his grace and how he's there with us every step of the way. So put in your AirPods, take us on a walk with you today. I know you're going to love meeting my new friend, Robin. Thanks for being here. Today, I am joined in the studio with a very famous author named Robin Jones Gunn. And funny enough, I read her books years ago, which were the Sisterchicks series. And I want to do a shout out to my dear friend, Kim Moeller, another fellow Kim, who said, Kim, I met Robin Jones Gunn. You have to have her on your podcast. So Robin is the best-selling award-winning Christian author of over 100 books, including the Christy Miller and Sierra Jensen series for teen girls, as well as the Glenn Brooks series and as I mentioned, the Sisterchicks series. And she's just got such an incredible journey of how she's listened to the Lord, said yes, and finds herself now this very famous author, but it was never a path she really consciously set off to go down. So, Robin, I will let you fill in any additional facts from your bio that you would like to fill in.
Well, first of all, thanks, Kim, for having me on your program. And I think the only other thing to add that people always think is so fun is that Hallmark has made 4 Christmas movies inspired by my books, which was a big surprise and so fun. Actually, my agent and I were invited to go on set, and we, at last minute, were called to be extras because they needed someone in the background. So
that is great.
You can say I'm also a movie star.
I love it. I just think that's wonderful. Well, I loved our pre-conversation, and I really want to almost just duplicate that conversation for a large part of this podcast, because I think it's fascinating how God moved you into the space of being an author and having so much influence over teen girls. And it really was never this specific area you planned to focus on. But let's kick it off with your story of poking your head into that tent when you were on the retreat with those teen girls.
I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. I went to college for 2 years at Biola, and I ended up working for a ministry organization in Orange County, answering mail. And one of the Christian clients that I helped answer mail for was Corrie. She had such an impact on my life, and also Brother Andrew. And I spent time with them, and I knew I wanted to be a missionary. That was it. I went to Mexico a couple times on mission trips. I went to Europe and ended up smuggling Bibles behind what was then the Iron Curtain. And then I knew this is how I want to spend my life. So I applied to go to whatever missionary organization would take me, and I kept getting turned down. And this one organization, they had an opening for a laundry supervisor in Nairobi, Kenya. And I filled out the form, and I told the girls in my Sunday school class that I had been teaching for a couple of years, I'm going to Africa. And they said, why? They said, oh, you don't understand. I'm going to get a big basket and put it on my head and go down to the river and wash clothes. I had no idea. But they said, we really don't want you to go. We want you to stay here and keep telling us stories. And I thought that was kind of mean in a way, because I got in trouble for telling stories when I was young.
Interesting.
It just never seemed like something that was redeemable or you could use. I was always embellishing and going on. And so I got the rejection letter from the position as laundry supervisor. And they said I just didn't have the skills for the position. I thought, Lord, I'm 22. What can I do for you? I can't even wash clothes in Africa. And it was not long after that I met my husband, Ross, and he was a youth pastor. So we started working with teens together. Then after our children were little, I wrote some children's books kind of for fun. It was a lark. And I actually, on a camping trip with these teenagers, as you said, peeked into the tent and said, girls, what are you doing? We're at San Clemente State Beach for a week. Out there, there's surf and sand and boys. And they're huddled in their tent with a stack of books they brought with them from the public library. And they said, we just want to read about surf and sand and boys. And I crawled in the tent and I read some of the books with them, skim read. And my heart was, these are 13-year-old girls putting things in their heart that is opposite of what I'm teaching in Sunday school. Right. And so they challenged me. Then why don't you write books for us? We'll tell you what to write.
I love that.
They did, and they were brutal. And it took 2 years before the first Christy Miller book was finished. 10 different Christian publishers turned it down, saying, we just don't see a market for books like this. And I wanted to say, well, go look in the tent.
Go talk to the teenagers.
Go look in your daughter's bedroom. See what she brought home from the library.
Right.
And so when that first book was picked up, it's called Summer Promise. When it was picked up by Focus on the Family publishers, they had just started publishing. And the response was so strong immediately, they asked that I write an entire series. And so far, I think I've written 45 books about those characters. Took Christy Miller from a 14-year-old girl. She's in her 30s now. Wow. And then I just kept writing. Other projects came, nonfiction, gift books. And I was then teaching at a conference in England on how to write. And I met a young woman from Nairobi, Kenya. I told her when I was your age, I thought I was going to go to Africa. And she laughed because she'd read my books in Nairobi. And she said, you did not need to come to Africa to wash our laundry. You sent your stories and they washed our hearts. And that's when I knew that was God's plan. I was a missionary. The books were the missionaries. They were going where I'd never go and speaking languages I would never learn. So bigger plan of God. We have to all remember that. He's doing things. We just can't see it.
I hear that so often on this podcast that someone had a plan to go one way. It turned out very different than they thought. But at the end of the day, that platform of influence was so much bigger than their one life would have had they gone there with their original plan. And it's so hard, though, when we're so convinced that we're supposed to go to Nairobi, we've prayed about it, and then that door slams, and it's hard to regroup and figure out, okay, did I hear you wrong, Lord? But no, it's just one step along the journey, and he says, trust me, I really am working a bigger, more beautiful story out. Hang in there with me. Turn into the next chapter.
Yep.
So, okay, so now Christy Miller, after all these books, is in her 30s, and so you're still writing additional books in that series?
Well, right now I'm writing a series called The Suitcase Sisters, and it's a little like the Sisterchick books that you mentioned. Those came out 20 years ago.
Yes.
But now the Suitcase Sisters are each story has two young women in their 30s, almost 40, and they take off on an adventure in some corner of the world and open up to each other about what's really going on in their lives. And they also see, being outside of their routine, how much bigger God is than they ever imagined, and come home quite changed. Those have really been fun to write. There's the first one is Tea with Elephants, and it's set in Nairobi.
Go figure. We're gonna get Nairobi in there, one way or the other.
I always wanted to write about it. I've been twice, and it just captured my heart. Mm-hmm. And then the second one is called Gelato at the Villa, and that's set in northern Italy. And nice. I'm almost done with the third one, so that's been fun. But yeah, just lots of different writing projects as they are presented mm-hmm. to me, and I always pray about it. And mm-hmm. it's been, again, so much more expansive than what I ever thought. Yeah. So
tell us how you structure your time as a career, a vocation as a writer, and like your discipline of, I like to write at 5 a.m, or I write from noon till 5, or I take a walk on the beach first. How do you get your inspiration? And then do you record it with your voice and then someone transcribes it? So I think it'd be fun to hear that side. Because let me also say in the podcast right here, we finished our 4-part series on impact investing. Prior to this podcast comes out every 2 weeks. So now Robin is kicking off a new series for us about creatives and how do creatives live a generous life? How do creatives use their time, talents, treasures when God has called them to be a writer? Our next guest is a Hollywood director. And then our next guest after that is a Christian musician here in San Diego. So trying to kind of just showcase, spotlight different ways, different callings. We're all called to live generously and what that might look like. So I think it'd be great to hear the kind of behind the curtain as a writer, some tips.
Yeah, when our kids were little and I suddenly had these contracts from a publisher to write more Christy Miller books, how would that ever get accomplished? My husband's youth pastor. There's kids at the house all the time. I had a few little part-time jobs here and there. And I was reading C.S. Lewis's Letters to an American Lady. And in one of his letters, he said something, I'll paraphrase it terribly, but it was like, I rise before dawn, make a proper pot of tea, and answer all my correspondence before breakfast. And he called it the still dewy, cobwebbed hours of the morning. Mm. And I've always been an early riser. Uh-huh. And so I thought, okay, well, that's the time of day I can capture. No one's going to call. Everyone's asleep. I can get a couple hours in. So I literally bought myself a proper teapot.
As one does.
I set the alarm for 3:00 in the morning, 3 days a week. And I could write from 3 to 7 and get so much done. Now I was done by 8:30 that night, but
sure.
That's how a majority of the work got completed. And my brain was at its freshest.
Yes.
And that became a rhythm that stayed probably the first 15, 18 years of writing. After the kids were out of the house, I could be more leisurely about sleeping in and writing, during the afternoon. But the only other consistent rhythm is how much instrumental music plays a part in what I'm writing, and how just having that in the background takes me away to remember certain places in the world, or certain soundtracks for certain books.
Interesting. Tell us more about that. What type of music do you like to listen to? Like cello, or because you write a lot about tropical places, is it more reggae and beach music?
It's a little bit of everything. And I have, my husband says that I have trained our Pandora station to play the kind of music I want, because that's literally what's happened. So then I can add new artists or something, perhaps based on a location or book. For instance, when I was writing about Italy in the Suitcase Sister book, there's a lot. I mean, Bocelli. But I like it with just instrumental, because there have been times I start really getting into the words of the song and I type it in the book. So it's better to not be so intently listening that it filters into the story. But the other thing that's become a habit lately that I love is I buy a new candle before each book, and then it's sort of a race. Every time I write, I light the candle, and then finished, blow out the candle, and fragrance is a very strong memory connector, and it is a little bit of a race to make sure I can get the book finished by the time I do have to buy larger, not just the little canister ones now, but a big candle. So that's been fun.
That's so great.
All those senses.
Yes. And then do you type on your laptop? How do you write the words?
I do a little bit of everything. Almost always the first chapter is written by hand, or at least the first 5 or so pages, just because it connects to a different part of your brain.
Right.
And it really does pull me into that place. And so that's how I start. And then once I have my grounding, I guess, then I usually write on the desktop because I have a nice wide screen, and that helps because if I'm researching, for instance, with the Italy book again, I'd been to Venice twice, but I was typing about something and I thought, I wonder if that's still how it is. And I learned all these things about how much had changed for tourists. If you aren't staying in Venice, you have to actually pay for day use during high tourist times. That just started last year. So I like having all those resources because on my laptop, I can't get as much all going at the same time. But then typically with a nonfiction book, it's all on the laptop. And I like to find a cozy corner and just light the candle and
right away. One of my friends loves that candle brand, Sand and Fog, and they have it at TJ Maxx oftentimes around here. But I just bought a big candle like for the summer that smells like sunblock. It's like coconut, and
nice.
It's my favorite.
Nice.
Yes.
That's great.
Oh, that's so neat, Robin. I love how the discipline, of getting up at 3 a.m. I just heard this other podcast host talk about the habits of a genius and their habits, right? That wouldn't have happened if you would have just hoped that you would have had uninterrupted time during your day with little ones. And even in today's world with your little ones now having grandkids, it doesn't happen unless we intentionally set aside that time.
So true.
Yes. So talk about the platform of influence that God has given you around the world. And you mentioned Brother Andrew, Corrie ten Boom, and I just want to do a little definition in case a listener doesn't know who those heroes of the faith are. You've got Brother Andrew, who wrote the book God's Smuggler. He's Dutch and took his little Volkswagen. And as you mentioned, it used to be called the Iron Curtain when it was the Soviet Union and all the Eastern Bloc communist countries. And he would have Bibles hidden under the floorboards of that little VW Bug and would covertly go across the border. And then while living in the Netherlands, one of his best friends was Corrie ten Boom. And she is an unbelievable hero of the faith also. Both are deceased today, but she wrote the book, The Hiding Place. I actually read that book in 4th grade, and it just had such a huge impact on me because she and her father and her mother and her sister Betsy, they were believers, and then had this closet, this secret room where they hid the Jews during World War II, but then eventually were discovered and went to the concentration camp where her sister Betsy passed away. And the father had a little watch shop in Haarlem, in Holland. And Corrie and Brother Andrew were such good friends. And then what I love about the story too is years later, Corrie ten Boom was living in Placentia, California, and her grave is here in Orange County.
It is.
She's Dutch, and Brother Andrew came over one time and saw her beautiful garden and her little suburban house there in Southern California. And he said, wow, God is so good. Just thinking how he brought her through the concentration camp. And she looked at him and said, yes, he is good, but he's good all the time. Like he was good in the concentration camp when they had lice in the barracks and the guards skipped that barracks so Betsy and Corrie could do a Bible study. So love that those two had such an influence on you, and they equally did on my life as well. And one other fun fact is my husband, after he was a pastor in Southern California, then led Brother Andrew's ministry here in Southern California for about 9 years. And really that ministry focuses, and it's changed a little bit now, but at that time really focused on the persecuted church around the world, where it really costs the most to be a believer. And so again, look at those two lives, how they impacted you, they impacted me, and I'm sure many of the listeners listening also have been impacted by them. And now I look at your life and these books that you didn't intend on writing, but how you've just had this huge influence across the world, with especially the teenage girls. So tell us more about what has come out of that unexpected platform.
Well, you made me think of something when Corrie was at the offices where I worked. The movie The Hiding Place had just come out. And these interviewers, the reporters, were there at the office, and they put her on a chair and they circled her and they started asking questions. And they elevated her so much of how marvelous she was. And she stopped them and said, "This crown you keep putting on my head, too heavy." End of interviews. And she got up and walked into the lunchroom. And that has always had such a visual to me of where we get off track when there are those people that are ordinary people that God is using in extraordinary ways. And then we elevate the humans instead of praising God. And with the more that the stories I've written have gone out around the world, the more I have been put in these positions where I think that's not what I ever aspired to, nor is it where the Lord ever asked me to be. Just come on back. I don't want this crown on my head. What's been really beautiful to see unfold is that the Christy Miller books were translated into Portuguese in Brazil probably 25 years ago. And the publisher there has been so faithful against much opposition to continue to publish different books in this series. And there's now a whole new generation of girls who grew up reading the Christy Ted books, is what they're called in Brazil. And I've been invited, Kim, to go to Brazil in July of 2025. That's the year we're recording this. And because there's a huge book fair, and suddenly Christian fiction, especially for young women, has just exploded in the last year and a half. And
who knew?
Who knew? And our son is going with me. I'm so excited to have that time with him too, and to be able to speak in churches and schools. And it's like that verse, it's the Lord's doing and it's marvelous in our eyes.
Yes.
Our position as artists, as believers, is simply surrender over and over and over again. And knowing that what he purposes for us is so much wider, wilder than we could ever imagine.
Yes.
I always think of like how when the angel Gabriel came to Mary and said, "You're going to bear the Son of God," basically didn't see that coming. But her response was, "May it be unto me according to your word." And I think for creatives that are listening, the most important thing you can keep reminding yourself is, may it be done to me according to your word, Lord. What aligns with your purposes and your plan and your word? And because I think in the arts, there's a lot of opportunity to get off track. And many of my fellow creatives have just gone down a path that later they said, "Oh, that was destruction, but I thought it was to build my career or to be improving."
I've seen that as well in the movies.
Yeah. And so the more we can be so focused on what the Lord wants and continually surrender, then the impact is done by his Spirit, not by us, truly.
So, so true. And you're just a vessel, and he's using you in extraordinary ways. It's his crown, as we know, not ours. And it's a wild adventure.
It is.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. So I know that you're living now in Orange County, and you had a season where you also, and the beach is a part of your DNA, but you also had an opportunity to live overseas, not overseas, but in on one of the Hawaiian Islands. And then it had to come to a close. So tell us a little bit about that, because sometimes the adversity piece of, things are going along according to plan or how we hoped it would go. And then all of a sudden, boom, we've got to pivot, and God has different plans. So what would you like to share about that season?
Well, yes, I ended up writing a book about, it concludes with how we ended up moving to Maui. And the book is called Victim of Grace, with that premise that we're not victims of our circumstances or things that go wrong, but rather we're living sacrifices, and that we lay our lives down. And if we want to call ourselves a victim, it's of his grace, which is new every morning and poured out on us. And was completely unexpected for both of us was this opportunity to move to Maui when our kids were out of the house, and we loved it. We were there 10 years. Such beautiful. It was wonderful. Had a really great church and so many good friends. And just when the pandemic was breaking out, my husband's health, one thing, another thing, he's in ICU. He's the specialist for the cardiologist he was seeing moved off island. He couldn't get into the hospital. And we were in just this place of digressing in health. And the Lord opened the door again to move to Southern California. Doctors, our daughter and her husband and kids live here. Like, that's the next season. Step into this. In order to do that, we had to sell everything. We sold cars, all our furniture, everything. And we arrived with 2 suitcases each and rented furniture and had a crate shipped over with family photos and computers and things. And just, it was so fast.
Wow.
So unexpected. In the middle of the pandemic, can't really go shopping for things you need very easily. And yet, the Lord's so good. I mean, that was, as Corrie said, that was his provision. And we've been in Costa Mesa area for 4 years, and he's stable. He's thriving. He teaches a men's Bible study every Thursday morning. Wow. And the Lord has just protected us in some remarkable ways. And the best thing is being near our grandkids. And,
yes.
You know, we knew we wanted to be near. Well, our first grandson was born on Maui because our daughter and her husband lived there then. We thought, well, this is great. They're always going to live here.
Of course.
And then he's a pastor. He's in full-time ministry. And this opportunity took him to California. And then they had another baby. And it's like, wait a minute.
This was not my plan.
Yeah. And then our son and his family are in Colorado. So we are closer to over to see them.
Quick 2-hour flight. Oh,
yeah.
And I remember you sharing that story in the book, your recent book, about the ocean and its beauty, but how your one little grandson would keep those shells, and you would find shells for him, and that was like your little love language between the two of you. I thought that was so sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. And I will often say, it's like, not sarcastically, but we talk about when we're afraid to go somewhere that the Lord's going to send us to Africa or wherever we might not want to go. But then I'll say, well, I'll go anywhere but Maui, Lord.
That will guarantee.
There you go. That might get me there. So thank you for sharing that. And what about anything else you'd like to say when we think about generous life, sharing your time, your talents, your treasures. I don't know if you guys have a private foundation or anything strategically you've decided to do with some of the proceeds from your books, or if there's like one area of giving you and your husband really are both passionate about, but anything you'd like to say, I guess, from more of the philanthropic side.
What we have been able to do is, as a team, pray about and respond to the many requests that come, because you'd be surprised. It's sort of our time becomes a bigger sacrifice than anything, because someone wants to talk about the book they want to write, or they want to.
Sure.
My husband was a counselor. After he was a youth pastor, he was a counselor for 25 years. So people want some counseling. And so there's so many things that we've been able to do with people who they didn't have to pay, even though we were giving professional services. So that the time is high value.
Absolutely.
High value. I had another opportunity last summer. A teacher in Zimbabwe said that she grew up reading the Christy Miller books and she wanted to use them in her classroom and was having a difficult time getting them shipped over there. So I was able to gather with some other friends who donated to pay for the books and then to do the shipping and to kind of go through someone that the teacher in Zimbabwe. Anyway, we got boxes and boxes and boxes of books to Zimbabwe, and then the pictures that came from all these girls in the classroom holding up their books, and they were doing, book clubs together and everything. So as the opportunity presents itself, Lord, what would you like us to do?
Yeah.
We're available. Let us know.
Right. And I love that you called out, it's definitely not just about the money side of things or the book royalties, but our time. And the older we get, you're right. It feels like you have more of it, but it feels like there's less. And the time is very, very valuable. And there's a lot of generosity involved when you and your husband are offering your insights, your wisdom, and helping others if God's calling them, down that path. You have so much experience. So thank you for sharing that. Well, before we wrap up with your current book you're reading, Bible verse, and then any recent bargain, is there anything else you would like to share to the overall audience, or specifically to that creative who might be afraid to take the next step but feels called, or there's the fear of, I can play the guitar, but I don't know how I can monetize that for my life, but I feel like I am called to be a creative, but it's so hard in this world where I've got to make money. So anything you want to wrap us up with those thoughts?
I was invited after we moved to Southern California to be a co-host on a podcast called Women Worth Knowing.
Yes, right. Yes. I'm so glad you're bringing that up.
Yeah,
yes.
That's just what came to mind, because
Perfect.
I have sent so many beginning writers to listen to that podcast, and we have almost 300 episodes, but Cheryl Broderson and I simply talk about ordinary women that God worked in extraordinary ways in their life. Women in history. We have some contemporary women that come in studio and we interview them. And as a creative, you have to homeschool yourself so much on so many things. And it's very possible to do all that with all the resources available, or as a writer, go to a writer's conference. Mount Hermon has a great one every spring. There's plenty of things you can do to train, but it's always those stories of other lives and how they faced adversities, which, this is what you love to bring up on your podcast, which I really appreciate, because life's really hard, isn't it?
I know it is. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So I encourage creatives to listen to that podcast. Find a woman on the list that the name rings a bell or doesn't. And these stories are so beautiful because Jesus wrote them. I love it.
Yes. No, that's so good. And then Cheryl, being the daughter of Chuck Smith, the fact that the two of you are the hosts, total rock stars, both of you. And I really enjoyed listening to a couple of the episodes as well. And that's a great resource because, like you said, you're interviewing contemporaries, but you've also got the Corrie ten Boom stories on there. And it just paints a really big vision of ordinary women and what God has done with, as we're all ordinary. And it's just our extraordinary God who is able to do great things through individuals.
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you. It's been so great chatting with you. So what is your favorite Bible verse?
It's Psalm 102:18, and I wrote it on a little 3x5 card 40 years ago when I started writing Christy Miller books. Oh my. And it says, "Let this be written for a future generation, that a people not yet created may praise the Lord." And I've seen God answer that prayer so many times now that the daughters of moms who grew up reading Christy Miller books gave their life to the Lord reading the books. Now their daughters are reading the books, and I'm getting mail from them, and it's like, God can do anything.
Yes,
He can do anything.
Well, I'm going to have my granddaughters. When I have them, they are going to read your series. Oh, beautiful.
And I think the other thing that I want to slide in here is that we are in motion with a production company that's doing the Christy Miller books. We have a fantastic script for a movie. We really love to see a series that's streamed, and the production team is raising funds.
Yes.
They have some huge supporters, and we're moving forward, but it's expensive.
Right.
And we're choosing to fund it from donors rather than just turning it over to a studio, because we all are in the industry and we know what happens. And I saw that with the 4 Hallmark movies. You sign at the bottom of the page and turn it over, and they can change everything and do what they want to do. So we feel really confident in what the excellent professional team we have that's put it all together. And so we're going to wait on the Lord until it's funded before we move forward. I'm so excited to see it happen. It's coming.
Me too. Absolutely. And shout out to James Volk and Kim Niemi and their hard work in just pushing this football down the field. And then, our sponsor of this podcast, the National Christian Foundation, that helps a person have a donor advised fund, the partnership that NCF has with Impact Foundation, and how people can use charitable dollars and move them from their NCF giving fund into Impact Foundation to fund movies, just like you're talking about. So if you want more info on that, I'll give everyone my email of kmoeller, MOELLER at ncfgiving.com, or you can also reach me at kim@impactfoundation.org. And if you're listening and you're feeling like, I want to be a part of funding this movie about the Christy Miller series, which also could be the first of many movies as well, please reach out. And I'm glad that you did a shout out for that. It's perfect.
Yeah, and then also my website, robingunn.com, ROBINGUNN.com. And there's info about the books, and you can email me through the website.
Perfect.
Because that's it. We want to see a future generation come to know the Lord. And we've seen the Christy Miller books have sold millions. I think we're at 5.5 million copies of those books sold and translated in other languages. And the way the Lord chose to use those stories with readers, and all the mail I get from girls who say, my best friend doesn't read, but she watches movies. Please make a movie, because then I can talk to her about it. And
very cool.
That would open up a door that has been closed. And it does feel like that season of, we just don't have the funds, or it's like, go look in the tent. Go look.
Right.
What is she watching?
Yes.
What is she absorbing? What messages are going into her young heart? And
Thank you for sharing. Okay, current book you're reading.
So I got a copy of the Psalms. It was given to me as a gift, and it's just the Psalms, but it's in an illustrated edition. I don't remember the publisher that did it, but it has space to write next to the Psalms, because the words are on the left side and then the right side is blank. And I love the Psalms, and I love that there's room to write and process. And I've been going through it, and there's certain things that I've been praying for and putting the date next to it. And then when I go back and look and go, wow, look how God answered that.
Look how he answered. I always put a square next to it.
Yes. Just like taking out just part of God's word and just diving into that. It's been so rich.
So rich. Thank you for sharing. All right. And your bargain.
So it's really through my daughter. She has a good eye. And she also has a thrift store near her. And literally, I will text her with, I need a planter by the front door. It needs to be rectangle. I kind of like blue or maybe white. And I describe it to her, and she'll pop in to her thrift store, which is in a really nice part of town. So people who are donating
nice things.
Maybe they're not so worn out as the part of town I live in. And it's so fun because she's like my personal shopper for the bargains.
I have a place like that where I live. It's called a State Sale Warehouse, and they can't take just individual things. They have to take the entire estate. And so it's one of those where you just have to stop by about every week or month and just see the latest thing. And so fun. Well, Robin, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for your generosity. And I'm excited to see how the Lord is going to fund the upcoming movie series about Christy Miller and your current books that you're writing about the girls traveling all over the world. I'll look forward to reading those, and just want to encourage every creative out there, keep going. And you've got a story to share. You have a medium that might be, ceramics. It might be sculpting. Who knows what it is that God has given you, that talent, that gift, that I just want to encourage you to share it with the world, because as you said, Robin, it'll be generations that could be affected by a creative's work. So thanks again. It's been a real honor and privilege having you on the show. God bless.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.